Post-election trials related to Iran's presidential election are underway, and the protests fueled by the disputed June election continue. Hundreds of people, including prominent reformists, have been arrested, and at least 30 were killed. Here to discuss the situation is Haleh Esfandiari, author of My Prison, My Home, a memoir about her own time spent in Tehran's Evin prison. Welcome to the program, Haleh.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Why don't you start off by describing the current situation in Iran for us?
I believe the government really got frightened from seeing these huge demonstrations. On one occasion, there were 3 million people on the streets, and therefore the Basijis and the Revolutionary Guard started shooting, killing people, arresting them, taking them to prison, and they decided that it's not enough to take your ordinary demonstrators to prison. It makes more sense to take the leadership of the reformist movement.
Why have the people who have been arrested, why have they not been allowed to have any kind of legal representation?
Political prisoners usually don't have access to legal representations, nor can they meet with their families.
But they've been charged with crimes of vandalism and violence. I mean, how is that?
Nevertheless, they are seen as political prisoners. And the families usually go, like in my own case, they appoint a lawyer, but the lawyers don't get to see the files of the detainees.
Give us some insight into your own situation. You were held at Iran's notorious Evin prison in 2007. You were actually on a trip to go and see your mother. I mean, how did you end up behind bars? What happened?
I'd gone to visit my 93-year-old mother. In the meantime, she has passed away. But, and so I stayed a week there, and I was leaving for the airport. On the road to the airport, the car stopped my car, and 4 men who were wearing knives on their, around their waist, jumped out of the car, came, told the driver to open the trunk, picked up my suitcase, took my bag, and in my purse, of course, I had my passport, and thus by quote-unquote stealing my belongings, I was without any papers. I became a paperless person, and in the process of applying for another passport, I suddenly noticed that this was not your regular and your ordinary robbery. I was dealing with the agent of the intelligence ministry who had been following me probably for some time.
Were you ever tempted to just give in to the pressures of your interrogators and to tell them what they were looking to hear?
No, I really was not. Of course, once I was put in prison and in solitary confinement, you have a sense of despair, because you don't know at all what's going on outside the prison. I didn't know that my family, my husband, my daughter, the Wilson Center, Lee Hamilton, the head of the Wilson Center, they were all involved in trying to get me out. I was not aware of that campaign. So when you are in solitary confinement, when you are there on your own, I mean, your interlocutors are either the women guards or your interrogators, so you sort of tend to get into a state of despair, and the interrogations were harsh. I was under a lot of pressure, but I didn't have anything to hide from them. I mean, I was very open with them. And then, therefore, when they published my, statements and so on, they were forced to cut and paste and just splice it, really.
Do you think that the United States, do you think that the U.S. administration should intervene in the cases of American Iranians who are being held?
Sure. I mean, not only the United States, but the whole world should intervene in the case of people who are put in prison unjustly. I think, of course, I think one of our problems, in my case, was that because Iran and the US have not had any relations for 30 years, so there is not even a representative there. There is not even an American consul there who can come and find out what's going on with the American citizens. They have to go through the Swiss.
Well, how do you see sort of future US-Iranian engagement being handled? Do you think that, given the current circumstances and the fact that an olive branch has been extended to the Iranian authorities, do you think that a rapprochement is possible?
I think the policy of President Obama and his administration have been the best policy towards Iran. The president has reached out to Iran and has asked for engagement. And I think given the current situation and the vast abuse of human rights, it makes more sense for the administration to sit back and wait for the Iranians to come to them. You know, it's not the Iranian, it's the turn of the Iranians to reach out to the United States. But when they sit across the table to talk about all the different issues, including the nuclear issue, on top of the list should be the human rights abuse in Iran.
Can you leave us with your sort of prognosis of where you see events going in the medium to long term, given the situation in Iran?
I see a very weak government. I think the government of President Ahmadinejad has lost its legitimacy and its credibility among the majority of the people in Iran because of the manipulation of the elections and because of the torture stories that we hear and these phony show trials, truly kangaroo courts. And so therefore, he will either have to rely more and more on the Revolutionary Guards and on the Basiji to control the population, or he has to turn around drastically and reach out to the population, and we don't see that.
So do you see the situation becoming explosive again in the sort of near to medium term?
I think it's going to be a repressive regime. And I don't know, how long the people feel they can come out into the streets and being beaten up and killed, and then I just don't know. I truly don't know. But the opposition has stood its ground very strongly. President Khatami, former Prime Minister Mousavi, former President Rafsanjani, Mr. Karoubi, they are standing their ground and they are defending the leadership of the reformist movement who is in prison. They are defending the ordinary citizens who have been taken to prison. So, so I think that we will see an internal war going on between the two sides for quite some time to come.
Okay, Haleh Esfandiari, thank you very much for joining us on Foreign Exchange.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.